right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the Introduction to Jira Align webinar. As the title of the webinar suggests, we're going to be talking all about Jira Align for this hour. We will talk about some concepts and also take a look at the tool itself. Before we get started, just some brief introductions. My name is Vicki Murphy. I'm an Enterprise Solutions Architect on our Agile at Scale team here at Axiom, which is a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian. And as of December 2022, we are now a proud Valiantus company. I am also joined by my colleague Elizabeth Wheeler, who you will see throwing some links and maybe answering some questions in the chat. Let's talk about what's on the agenda for today. So we're in the introduction part, got a couple more things to mention before we move into some concepts. So I do have a few slides to show here. It's really important that we align around some basic concepts before we actually start taking a look at Jira Align. Once we wrap that up, we will be doing a live tool demonstration. So I'll get into Jira Align and show it to you firsthand. And at the end of the hour, we'll have some time for a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout this presentation, do throw them in the Q&A panel in Zoom, and we will get to those at the end of the hour. Couple of fun things to mention. First, we are going to do a swag giveaway for this webinar. So we are giving away an Axiom power bank, and one lucky attendee here will win that. You don't need to do anything to enter. You've already, just your attendance is enough, and we'll be announcing that at the end of the hour. Another fun item I want to cover is our upcoming special event called Jira Align Success Stories Over Wine. This is one of my favorite events that we do here at Axiom because we literally ship a flight of wine and snacks to your door. And when the event starts, we start talking about Jira Align. And for this event on May 23rd, we are actually going to be joined by 3 enterprises who are at varying stages of their Jira Align implementation. We're going to hear firsthand from them about their stories with Jira Align. So do go ahead and register for that if you're interested. It is limited seating. We do have a few spots left, so don't hesitate to go ahead and get signed up. There's a QR code on my screen, and also in the chat should be a link to a link tree. Any of the links or resources that I mentioned, including to register for this event, will be included on that link tree. So feel free to take that and bookmark that. All right. Let's go ahead and get started with some of our concepts here. I always like to start talking about the positioning of Jira Align because it is quite unique compared to some of the other Atlassian tools. So Jira Align really is designed for organizations who have implemented or are in the process of implementing a framework for scaled Agile. This could be the SAFe framework, which is very popular, or something like the Spotify model as well. We've really found that organizations are most successful in implementing this tool when they've actually been through at least one program increment. You may have heard this referred to as a planning increment, quarterly increment, etc. But one increment of that scaled planning process. And why we found that to be really an indicator or a leading factor to success with Jira Align is there's a lot of process decisions that go into the configuration of Jira Align. So if you have some of that under your belt as an organization, it's just going to help you make those decisions quicker and easier, as well as teaching your end users a new process and a new tool is a lot. And those end users do still have day jobs we want them to be accomplishing. So you can kind of ease some of that potential fatigue by staggering the process and the tooling just a little bit. Something you're going to hear me say a lot today is that Jira Align is a large tool that is meant for enterprises. So Jira Align does have a higher price point than other Atlassian tools like Jira Software. It is designed for enterprises that have at least 500 developers. We do believe that smaller organizations may struggle with the overall size of the tool or potentially the price point, or maybe even both. If you feel like you may be in that boat, don't fret. There's still lots of options for you to scale your process within other Atlassian tools like Jira Software. And I'm going to talk just briefly about advanced roadmaps and how that can be a good starting point or help with the scaling process for some of those smaller organizations. So I'll talk about that in just a couple of slides. As we will see when we get into the tool, Jira Align really can handle the planning and visualization of work from the C-suite down to the Agile team. So you're going to see lots of visualizations that look like this this pyramid or hierarchy here as we talk about really the purpose of Jira Align, which is helping us connect that execution up to the strategy and back down again. And this really is a robust application that's going to help us align work across our enterprise. I always like to talk briefly about scaled planning because it is one of the main concepts that plays into Jira Align. And I like this image. First, I'm just a fan of a whiteboard, so I like that about this. But second, I think it does a really good job by showing all of the complexities of scaled planning and how there's a lot of moving pieces. And as we get into Jira Align, we're going to talk about some of the pieces in each of these boxes you see here and how Jira Align can help us really connect those dots across our enterprise. So at various layers of scale, we're going to be doing various types of planning. At our team level, we're going to be talking about that sprint or iteration planning, where we're talking about our stories. That feeds into our, this says big room planning, but you may call it something like PI planning or program planning, where we're working with our features, those deliverable items to our customers. That goes up into our portfolio planning here, referred to as master planning, where we're really making a lot of those budgeting decisions, prioritizing what larger items of work we want to be accomplishing to achieve our strategy. And there's also going to be some pieces around slicing, getting a different slice of data more around your products, just depending on how you're organized. If you need this, Jira Align can help support it. As you can see, starting an Agile transformation or scaling Agile in your organization can be a very long and complex undertaking. And while tools don't define our processes needed for scaled Agile, they are an invaluable piece to help us plan, track, and visualize our work. Now let's talk a little bit more about Jira Align and how it handles this complexity of scaled planning. Again, what Jira Align really helps us with is connecting our execution up to our strategy. And it does this by helping us link people, the work they do, and time across our enterprise. So as we'll see when we get into the tool, we're going to be able to easily go from that team level up to the enterprise level and back down again to get the full picture of our execution and our strategy. Jira Align does offer modules around product management, strategic portfolio planning, and scale development as well, all within the tool itself. You can also see on this diagram that Jira Align is meant to layer with a team level planning tool. Most commonly, this will be Jira software or potentially multiple instances of Jira software. Little bit of history here. When Jira Align first started, it was created by a company, and it was called AgileCraft. And when it was AgileCraft, it really was meant to be this full stack tool for everyone within our enterprise to be working within it. A few years ago, Atlassian acquired AgileCraft and turned it into Jira Align. And when they did that, Atlassian already had a really great team level tool called Jira Software. It has a lot of great functionality for our Agile teams, like the Agile boards, both Kanban and Scrum, the reports around those boards, the filters and dashboard capabilities as well, really lend themselves to that team level planning and execution. So through the process of turning AgileCraft into Jira Align, Atlassian really recommends that teams continue working in Jira software, and then we're able to sync that data from the team level into Jira Align to get that roll up into the strategy. And this is a bi-directional sync, so we'll get some information from that program layer back down to the team so that they're able to understand what features that they are working on as well. Let me get a drink here. So really everything above the team level, from the program layer on up to the enterprise, is where Jira Align really shines in helping us with our planning, visualization, and execution of our work. As Jira Align helps us plan and execute our work across the enterprise, it's going to use those three hierarchies that I mentioned previously: people, work, and time. This slide can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming, but if you really think about the basis of all work, it's made up of those three things: people, the work that they are doing, and what time frame they are trying to complete that in. And so as we are working in Jira Align, we're going to see all of these represented. So let's just walk through them really briefly here. When we're talking about people, this is where we're going to start up at the top with our enterprise. This is typically your leadership in your organization, C-suite, et cetera. And they're going to be working on that strategy, that long-term and near-term strategy for the organization. Below that, we get into our portfolio and potentially a solution layer. We then have our program, or that agile, or that team of teams layer. And then below that, we have our agile teams as well. And each of these layers of people are working on different items of work, and you see that represented over here in the orange. So we have our strategy. We can decompose that into themes, decompose that into portfolio epics. That is where we're going to do a lot of our budgeting, potentially deciding really what is going to be advantageous for the organization to complete. We may be working with capabilities, our features, those deliverable features to our end customer. And then we have our stories and tasks that our teams are working on as well. And all of these are going to be linked up this hierarchy in Jira Align to, again, connect that execution down here at the team level all the way up to our strategic items at the very top. We're also going to be talking about different time frames, so we'll see some of these represented in the tool. The idea of a strategic snapshot, just comparing our strategy year over year or in multi-year periods. We'll have that program or quarterly increment represented. And then we are going to have our sprints or anchor sprints in Jira Align and releases as well. And you can see these business vectors that can really plug into any of these layers. So we're going to have those represented in Jira Align too. All right. A couple more things to know about Jira Align. There are two editions. There's a standard and an enterprise edition. We see most people going for the enterprise edition because that is how you can get a sandbox to Jira Align. So that's usually something that organizations are looking for. There is one add-on for Jira Align at this time. It's called Enterprise Insights. It's essentially a data lake that you can connect to your Jira Align instance in a BI tool of your choice, like Power BI or Tableau, and get more custom reporting options from your data in Jira Align. Couple of items that are new and upcoming. We have seen over the last few months a new objectives tree experience roll out. So it's really a UI update as well as some minor functionality updates for that visualization of our objectives and our goals and our key results in Jira Align. In that link tree is going to be a link to some of our videos where we do a deep dive into this. We're continuing to see Atlassian update the API for Jira Align and the connector between Jira software and Jira Align to make it more robust and make it more user-friendly. Atlassian has recently removed the out-of-the-box time tracking add-on. That actually is going to be fully removed from production instances this week, but they have added in some integration with Tempo timesheets. So if you're doing time tracking, there are still options for you. And finally, we're really just seeing Atlassian put a lot of effort into making sure we have consistency across the system. Everything from user-facing pages to administrative pages to the API is really, they are doing a good overhaul, making sure we have consistency across the system. So there should also be a link to our Jira Align update series where we cover any of those updates that they put out and demonstrate anything that we can in the tools for you. So do check that out in that link tree. All right, at this point, we've usually talked quite a bit about Jira Align, and then people, the natural question that we often get is, what does it really take to implement Jira Align, or what does it look like to implement it? And so, as you've probably gathered, it really is a big tool. It's a big deal to implement, and that means it takes some time and effort to implement. So Typically, when we are doing a new implementation, we will start with one program or Agile release train, that team of teams layer. Typically 3 to 5 Agile teams is what we see. And that's going to essentially be our POC. They're going to be our pilot program that we're going to get into the tool throughout this process. So we are typically talking about a 3 to 6 month process here. It's typically about a combined 700 hours of effort from the implementation team to get this tool implemented. We're going to go through a planning phase, a discovery phase, learning about your process and how that might fit into Jira Align, and discussing anywhere we might need to change either the tool or the process to mesh well. We'll do our configuration phase, as well as training for key staff, that first pilot program, administrators, etc. And then we really try and lead up to one of those PI planning events where the users are actually using the tool for that event. Once we really wrap that up, we'll of course do some validation. We'll make any adjustments that we need to based on user feedback, and then we'll start expanding. And so we'll expand into other programs, and then potentially also up into that portfolio layer as well. These are typically the standard implementation steps that you are going to see across really any partner that is doing a Jira Align implementation. Before getting into the tool, like I mentioned, I just want to talk briefly about advanced roadmaps. And I like to talk about this because sometimes if Jira Align isn't excuse me, advanced roadmaps can be a really good lead into Jira Align. So it's really great for growing Agile organizations that need that visibility, shared focus, and accurate delivery, and that planning across multiple teams. And what advanced roadmaps can also let you do is connect that execution to your strategy. So this is a road mapping tool. It does have some roll-up functionality, and we've seen it be really useful for smaller organizations who are implementing a scaled Agile process, or even large organizations that are just starting that journey. It can be a great place to start. Advanced Roadmaps is now included with Jira software cloud premium instances, as well as data center instances. So a lot of times it's a tool that's already available to organizations and can be very helpful in those beginning days of that scaled Agile transformation. We also should have a link to our portfolio management webinar, which dives a little bit more into advanced roadmaps and some other tools that we see being used in Jira, as well as briefly touching on Jira Align some more. And that leads us into our demo. So let me get out of the slides here and jump over to Jira Align. As I'm logging in here, I will mention Jira Align is a cloud-based tool, and it can integrate with your single sign-on strategy if you have one. All right, the first thing I always like to cover is the navigation of Jira Align, and I like to cover this for two reasons. One, it's a little different than other Atlassian tools you may be used to, and two, because it starts to really show and demonstrate how the tool is organized in that hierarchical fashion that we just looked at in our slides. So you'll start to see some of those terms we were talking about in the slides start to appear as we talk about the navigation. We navigate Jira Align to the various different modules using this left-hand panel, this blue bar. So you start at the top with a home button, then your profile where you can adjust some of your settings. I'm going to skip down to this little web icon here. This is our enterprise layer. And if you'll remember from a couple of those slides, when we're talking enterprise, we're talking strategy. So you're going to see the word strategy a lot here. Strategy room, strategic backlog, strategy tree, etc. The icon below that is our portfolio. So again, thinking about that hierarchy, it is literally set up around that hierarchical fashion here. So we have our portfolio area where we're working with our themes and our epics. We'll also have things like our portfolio backlog, etc. here. Below that, we have our solution layer. Not every organization needs the solution layer. So by default, it is turned off. And through your implementation process, if your process needs the solution layer turned on, your implementation partner can help you with that. Then we have the program layer, that team of teams layer. So this is where we're going to start working with our features. We're going to have visualizations like our program board, our objectives, etc., our roadmaps, all here at the program layer. There is a team layer in the tool, keeping in mind that we want to be executing our work at the team layer in Jira software, but it has to land somewhere when it syncs over here to Jira Align. So this is where you can get some of that information for the team layer. And then there is a product layer, and this is that additional slice of information. Again, it's going to be turned off typically by default, and just depending on how you're organized around your programs and portfolios and how organized around value you are, this may not be a necessary piece of the tool for you, but it is here if your process needs it. At the bottom, we'll have some additional buttons around reports. And then this settings gear is the administration. And I like to jump in here and just show one thing in the administration setting, and that is the terminology. And at this point, I always like to call out that there's a lot of customizable terminology in Jira Align. So if you've seen Jira Align before, or if your organization already has it, and some of the buttons I'm pointing to don't match up to what they are called in your instance, it's likely just that you've customized that. And so just be aware that there is dozens of terminology items that can actually be customized in Jira Align here. All right. Next, let's talk about the top gray bar that you see here. This is what we call the context bar. So the context bar is serves as a filter across the entire instance. So as you click into those various different modules, this is what's going to filter the data that you are looking at. So you are able to actually choose what slice of information you are viewing here. You are able to select from that different layer of scale here. So your portfolios, your programs, even down to the team layer, you're able to select those various options from either this left side or the right side actually shows you that full hierarchy, which is very nice. You're also able to make your time slice of data here. So what program increment are we looking at, or what date range are we trying to look at? As you make selections here and you click through things like reports or other visualizations, that's what's going to dictate, this is what's going to dictate what data is shown. Whenever we're working with organizations and new users in Jira Align, we often get questions around, I'm looking at this visualization and it's not showing the data I expect. And I will say 9 times out of 10, it is something in the context bar that they maybe have a different selection, or maybe they didn't add a PI to their data that they are looking for, etc. It often comes down to something in the context bar. There are additional configurations that you can add in here as well. And you can add advanced configurations or save your selections here under these settings gears. Moving over to the right and calling out a couple of buttons over here, under the clipboard button, you are able to add in checklists. So essentially putting some of your process directly in the tools for your users to follow here. There are also some out-of-the-box training simulations that can be enabled from Atlassian. There are some in Jira Align notifications that will appear in app, as you can see here, and they can send email notifications as well. At this time, these are specific to Jira Align and are going to show notifications from other Atlassian tools. Next, we have a search icon, and this searches our work items. So let me X out of this really quick and just point out that next to this is the create button. This is how you can create work items throughout Jira Align. So you're always going to see this button like in other Atlassian tools. So you're able to make any of the work items you have permission to make here. Next to that, if you need to search for a work item, you can click the search icon. I always like to mention just a little tip. If you're looking for a work item ID number, make sure you put the #, hashtag, octothorpe, whatever you want to call it here first, and then it will actually search those work item IDs. Each work item that you can create in Jira Align has its own ID sequence. So everything starts at 1. And as you can see, that means you could have a #1 story, feature, dependency, etc. So it's going to split up your search results here based on work item. And moving down to the bottom, one of my favorite pieces of Jira Align is this blue help button. This is a contextual help button, meaning that you can click this at any time and it's going to show you information about the module or page you are viewing. This is really helpful, especially on things like reports. It will tell you prerequisites for the report, the data it's looking for, and how to interpret the report as well. But it works on pretty much every page in Jira Align. Also works on administration pages for any admins who are joining us today. I do want to mention two more quick pro tips for working with Jira Align. As you can see, navigating this tool can take some time to get used to. It really is a very big tool. On the left-hand panel here, there are two buttons that are going to be really helpful. There is a search button. This searches the navigation panel. I like to keep the two search buttons separate by thinking if it's on the blue bar, it searches the blue bar, versus the search button over by the create button, which searches our work items. But here you can put in the name of any of your modules and it will start to filter those for you. And the star is a favorite. So you are able to click this little plus button. You can favorite current pages or search for a specific page and add those here. So if you're frequently going to specific pages, utilize this to help you ease that navigation. All right. Now let's start talking about some of the modules here. As you've seen, this is a very big tool, so we're not going to be able to talk about everything in Jira Align. It would be, in my opinion, impossible to do that in an hour. So we're going to hit some of the highlights, really focusing on the two overarching uses of Jira Align, which are strategic top-down planning and the visualization of work in progress that rolls up, again, from that Agile team layer up all the way through our layers of scale into the strategy. So let's first talk about top-down planning. I always like to talk about this by starting at the very top and looking at our strategy room here. At each layer of Jira Align has a room, and it essentially serves as a dashboard, if you will, for that layer of scale. And again, I'm going to call out that keep in mind that this visualization will be filtered through your context bar. So always keep that in mind. At the very top here, we see our mission, vision, and values. These can be for the organization itself, and it just keeps everyone aligned here. I like to think of it as I've worked at organizations where we used to put these things up on the walls or in picture frames, etc. And now we are all a little bit more remote, a little bit more spread out, and we can put them directly here in this tool to align on them. Below that, we then have our strategy pyramid. So this is starting to show us how all of our work rolls up again into that tippy top of our organization with the mission, vision, and values. One thing I like to call out here is these various layers of goals are somewhat customizable. We can turn some of them off. We could add some additional ones, and they are customizable terms. So if you call your long-term goals something else, you can rename that in the tool. But here you can start to see a count of how many of each item you have, again, related to the selections in the context bar. Over on the right here, we have our, we're starting to talk about that execution. So execution against our outcomes. How are we going at completing things like our team, program, and portfolio objectives here? And snapshot progress. So I selected a snapshot when I first got to this room, just essentially setting that time box of that I am looking at again. And here it's again showing me that execution. Now, how am I going at completing things like my themes, epics, features, all the way down again to that team layer of stories and dependencies. Below here, we then have an OKR heat map, so we can do objectives at any layer of scale, and those can feed up into our goal layers as well. And then this is going to show us how we're going at actually completing those. So tracking our objectives with key results, for example, and how we are going about actually accomplishing those. And there's also an OKR tree, again, showing you that roll up so we can link our top layer of goals all the way down to team objectives and see that visualization here. Overall, the strategy room is where we can really easily see and analyze how progress is rolling up to the very top of our organization. Another area of the tool that is heavily used when we're talking about planning is the backlog. So let me go ahead and open that up here. Jira Align has one backlog module, and you can toggle between the backlog at various layers of scale. So here at the top, we are going to see that where we can toggle between things like our themes, epics, capabilities, all the way down again to the team level items like stories and defects. The backlog is also going to be split by program increments. So that is what we see collapsed here. We can expand these and do quite a bit here within the backlog module. So we are able to use this caret to expand any item. So I'm looking at my epic backlog. So if I expand these, I should see any child features right here. And if you were to go down the next layer, you would see features with child stories. The backlog, as you might suspect, is also where we can do some prioritization. So we are able to drag and drop these items to actually reprioritize them. You can also right-click, and there's some quick buttons like move to top, move to bottom, move to a specific position as well. So this is where we're really going to be centering around what are those high priority items for us in this upcoming or a future PI. All right, let's go ahead and open up an epic here and just take a look at what this looks like. So epics, again, are where we are often doing a lot of our analysis, a lot of our budgeting practices, etc. And so there is a lot, there are a lot of fields available on our epics. You'll notice we have several different tabs. Some work items in Jira Align do have different tabs, so we'll just briefly step through these here. Here's where we have just our general information. You'll see that epics can span multiple program increments. And below there, we are able to add in a WSJF or weighted shortest job first prioritization, as well as an estimate for each PI. At the bottom here, just to call out, a lot of work items in Jira Align will have this full details section where you can expand it and view a lot more, potentially a lot more fields. And there's also a links section. So directly from that work item, you're going to see any of those linked work items, such as the child features here. You can expand these and see a bit of information, including that roll up of progress. When we're seeing any of this progress here, we're looking at the epic layer, but again, this is the roll up from the team layer. So whenever we're talking about epics in the portfolio layer, we always like to call out that the data you're actually looking for starts at the team layer. It's important that teams are estimating their work, linking that up the hierarchy, and completing their work in Jira software so we can start to get information like this about progress on a feature that rolls up to the progress on our epic itself. Up at the top, we can see some of that progress as well right here. You'll notice it's saying story points accepted. Again, looking all the way down the hierarchy into our team level work. Couple other tabs that we have around epics. So we are able to put in some design information. We can have a custom intake form here just to fill out whenever we are first creating the epic. The benefits tab starts to build out our lean use case here. So we have some customizable fields. It's also taking some data from that details field to build out that lean use case. There's also value engineering in Jira Align. And so here you're able to get that value score as well as input a hypothesis and actually keep track of the dates around that as well as potential costs. Time and Skills has some tracking around your overall schedule, as well as fixed date milestones that you can view on your roadmap. And then there's the spend tab, which is always a crowd favorite. This is where we are able to input a budget for the specific epic, view the accepted spend, the forecasted spend, the estimated spend. All of these have different calculations that you can view in the tool by clicking on these links further. But I always like to call out that this is a crowd favorite, this view. But again, all of this is, if you look at it, is coming up from the story level. So you're not going to have a ton of data here if we don't have that team level sorted out in Jira software. And that's really why when we talk about implementing Jira Align, we start at that program level, that team of teams level. So we make sure we're getting that data that can then roll up into the portfolio layer when it is time. So that's a little bit about the epics and about the backlog here. I also like to toggle just to show features, since that is typically where we often start here. So just going to this top toggle button and switching to the feature backlog. And we'll let it load here. Again, we can do everything we could with the epics. We can rank these, we can expand them to see other child items like stories. And we can open this up to view more information. So one thing to point out is the feature layer is where we start syncing bidirectionally with Jira software. So you're going to see a button called View in Jira here, so that we are able to get that easy interaction between those two systems. And this is really what a feature looks like. Again, we're just going to be filling in our typical details here. And at the bottom, linking our child stories, where again, we can start to see that roll up of progress. I also like to show the why field here. So the why field is a really helpful field that does sync to Jira software as well. That is just going to show us really why this feature might be important to the organization. So it's going to show us information from this feature itself, from its parent epic, from that epic's parent theme, information about the WSJF score if we use it, and other information as well here. So this can just be a really great place to get context about our various work items. Cool. All right, let's jump into a different visualization now that we've looked at the backlog here. I'm going to go to the program layer and I'm going to go to the program board. So we're still talking about that top-down planning. And the program board is a great visualization for that planning process. So, excuse me. The program board isn't a new idea. You may have seen this done physically in the past with a whiteboard and a lot of sticky notes and string. And tools like Jira Align are now allow us to do this digitally. So especially in this day and age of remote and dispersed teams, this can be a really valuable functionality. What's also really valuable about this is that it's a real-time report, essentially. So while teams will use this during PI planning, they can also come back to it throughout that PI to actually view progress for the PI as well. So let's just take a look at what this is showing us here. The rows on the program board represent our teams that make up our program or Agile release train, and the columns represent the sprints in that program increment. We have a lot of different little icons here. What we are typically planning out throughout PI planning is going to be our features, which are represented by our rectangles here. You can click on these to actually view more details about that feature. During PI planning, we might also be identifying dependencies. Those are represented on the board as these little Chevy icons or plus icons, bow ties, whatever you want to call them. And we also are able to view our objectives on the top row here as well. So our team and program objectives and milestones will be represented for us. There are a couple of things I want to show you up here at the top just to help you with understanding this. So whenever you first start using the program board, these symbols, while they may look nice, may not mean a ton to you just yet. With this little tree icon, you can change the view. The normal view here will actually show you the summary of those work items. I just like to use the small view, excuse me, for demonstration so you can see a bit more of the board. And then there also is a legend here, and this will show you what every color, every symbol, every icon means on the board. So if you're getting into Jira Align, go ahead and check those out, and you may want to consider changing your view there. Another couple great things about the program board. One, you may have seen as I was hovering over work items earlier that it will actually do some highlighting for us. So as we hover over a work item, let me see if I can find a good one here. You'll see that it grays out a lot of the work items. It's going to highlight the one that you have hovered over and anything that is linked. So if there are multiple teams supporting this feature, as we see here, the Cowboys and the Baltimore team are supporting this feature, it's going to be displayed on each each of their rows. And then we're also going to see highlighted any linked objectives or dependencies as well. So it's really great in planning this feature to see what all is linked across the board. And also these colors, these do represent planning issues. And I always like to call it stoplight mentality. Green, blue, gray are generally good. Red, orange, yellow, we may want to start looking at this because there's likely some planning issues. And this is a built-in piece to Jira Align. When you click on any of the work items, it's going to show you those planning issues at the top so that you and your teams can work together to try and solve those. Like I mentioned, this is a real-time updating report. So if you look at the dates here, we are somewhere within sprint 26 or 27, right at the end of sprint 26 here. We can see that we have been completing a lot of our work throughout the PI, but it's starting to flag some new items as red because maybe we haven't completed them, maybe there are new planning issues. So we can always come back here to actually view any of those potential new issues along the way throughout the PI. All right. While we're talking about items on the program board, let's take a quick look at the dependency management module. Again, with the idea of planning here, Jira Align does have a dependency management area. We're able to add these dependencies into the tool and then visualize them on things like the program board or here in the dependencies grid. And we can open these up to just see that you can collect a lot of data about a dependency, and they even have a small workflow with them. So when a dependency is first created, it's not committed to. We actually have that handshake represented here in the tool where teams are able to commit to the dependency and then eventually complete them here. I always like to mention, though, dependencies should always start with a conversation before we input them into Jira Align to make sure we've identified the right team, that they're available to do the work, they have the right skills, etc. And then we're able to represent that communication in Jira Align as a dependency, as you see here. The dependency grid has a lot of different views to it, so you can view items that you've sent out and requested of other teams, as well as work that your team or program may need to complete here. Another really great visualization in Jira Align are the dependency maps. So if we click on maps here, there are 5. I'm just going to show the wheel view. It's really common for organizations to struggle with understanding, coordinating, tracking, and collaborating across teams. And so being able to add dependencies to a tool is really great. But visualizations like this can help leaders understand where these dependencies really exist and potentially reorganize teams or Agile release trains to decrease the number of dependencies and handoffs between teams, which will just help us increase our speed to market here. So we can even click on any of these little spokes of this wheel and see some details about that specific team and the state of their dependencies that they have requested of others and others have requested of them as well. All right. I also really like showing the risk management module. So again, under the program layer of the tool, we can go to risks here. Jira Align has a risk work item, and it also follows the roam method, which is supported by processes like SAFe. So we'll just open one of these up. We're able to add these risks to Jira Align, add them for our program and our program increment, and then we're able to even link them to our work items. And this linkage will be represented on the program board by features turning yellow. So if you link a risk to the feature, it's going to display as the yellow color on the program board. You'll see here that we do have that roam method represented of resolved, owned, accepted, and mitigated. So we're able to use this resolution method field to actually choose that selection. Excuse me. There is also a really great report around this. So you can see a little bit of information about these risks here on this risk grid. But if we go to the roam report, This is a great visualization that is just going to show us the breakdown of how we've actually roamed our risks for that PI and that program. So we see this being used a lot during that PI planning event, as well as throughout the PI, to just understand how frequently we are using each of the categories, how many risks we have, etc. So as you can kind of see, really any of the work items in Jira Align also have some type of visualization with them, typically a specific report, or as we see when we look at the program room in a bit, there will be often multiple places that we can visualize each of these work items. All right, as you can see from the menus here and the visualizations we've looked at, Jira Align really is a robust tool that's going to help us with our strategic planning, from our strategic goals all the way down to our team layer. And it does help us with that top-down planning and understanding of the connection of our organization's vision to the work that we are carrying out to complete that vision. Right. Before we talk about visualizing that roll-up of work a little bit more, I just want to briefly pause for a little bit of an Axiom commercial and tell you a little bit more about us and some of our upcoming opportunities. As I mentioned, Axiom is now a proud Valiantis company, and we are also a Platinum Solutions partner with Atlassian. And we offer services really in 3 main buckets. We have training. We do this type of training, our free webinar series. We also have some paid classes that are offered publicly, as well as private training. And I'm going to show you some of our upcoming public opportunities in just a moment. We do consulting. This is everything from implementation of Atlassian tools, configuration, cleanup, migration, etc. And we also do custom development. Axiom was actually born out of a custom development shop, and we have a team of full stack developers. So if there is something that our customers need that isn't available in the ecosystem already, we're able to create that, whether it be a custom API, a custom integration, custom interface, etc. Here are some of our upcoming events over the next couple of months. Wanted to go the other way. And one of these that I want to call out is our upcoming Jira Align Bootcamp. And this is a one-day class where we will go more in depth over the subjects that we have covered in this webinar. So we actually follow a little bit of a similar outline, but we're going to actually get you into the tools. It will be a hands-on class as we go through each layer of scale, best practices for implementing and making the most out of your Jira Align implementation, as well as just some pro tips for using the tools. So we actually have a class coming up next week on May 3rd. You can register either from the link tree again in the chat or using this QR code. And if you input the promo code VAL20, you'll get 20% off. It is a one-day class, 9 to 5, and it really is a great opportunity to get your hands into Jira Align. All right. Let's go back and look at a couple more visualizations, and then we'll get to that Q&A. All right. So talking more about how we can visualize our work. So we've already seen that a little bit throughout visualizations like the backlog and the program board and the risk roam report here that we have. Just a lot of visualizations that are going to help us in that planning process and then post-planning to visualize our work. But let's focus on a few others that can help us with that visualization as well. I'm going to focus mainly on the program layer on up. Again, keeping in mind that teams are typically operating in Jira software where they have a lot of great visualizations around their level of work there. Let's take a look at the program room. Again, rooms are really just a dashboard, if you will, for each layer of scale. And this is what the program room looks like. And we see this being really beneficial. Some organizations like to use this during PI planning, and I see a lot of organizations using this throughout the PI and some of those ceremonies they may be running, like Scrum of Scrums, PO Sync. You may call them something different, but anytime we're really trying to look at the overall progress of our program or Agile release train and our teams, this is a great visualization. It starts out by just showing us some quick statistics about our PI, what we have loaded into it, and then it's going to start showing us that plan versus execution here. So we're going to see our PI velocity versus our load. Are we overloading our teams here or the program itself? Are we or are we accurately loading data or loading work in. Team progress here, we're going to see broken down by team by either points or story count, how they are actually going about completing their work. So again, a great visualization to just see where each team may be at. We also have the team load, which can be really useful during that PI planning event as we're loading in work and giving it that high level estimate during the PI planning event. Teams can use this as just a visualization around if they are on track or overloading for that PI. Again, we're going to see visualizations like our risks here. I'll show you in a second the dependencies and objectives on the other side of the screen. We can visualize one of our checklists here, again, helping us making sure we're following the right process along with the tools and putting some quick links to different modules in here. We have a great little roadmap for our PI, again, still showing us progress from that team level, even with this visualization. We can see our, I like to call this the mini backlog. It is the backlog. It shows us our features and their child stories, but you're not going to be able to do things like ranking here. You will need to go to that backlog module that I showed previously. And on the right, we just have even more progress options. We can view our dependencies and our objectives here as well. At the top, I always like to show that we can also filter down by a single team. So we see each team's icon here. We can select one of these, and it's going to filter it down by that specific team. So a lot of times in those Agile ceremonies, we are looking at the release train as a whole, but we also may need to dig down into an individual team, and this visualization lets you do that right here. If we need to flip back to the entire program, we just click Program View. So as you can see, this visualization really just helps us understand our plan as well as our execution throughout our program increment. Let's also take a brief look at the roadmap available in Jira Align. So again, under the program layer, this roadmap does allow us to see a couple layers of work. It has a lot of settings into it, and we are getting close to time here, so we aren't able to go through all of those today. But I do just want to show you that it does have a roadmap. We can see a couple layers of work. There's state. We can do some more customization if needed to view more information. We can also work with these bars to drag and drop them to adjust dates in the plan, etc. So we're going to be able to really get a good visualization of that plan, PI by PI, sprint by sprint, or even month by months and quarters as well from this roadmap view. All right, jumping up to the portfolio layer, just to show you that we do have a portfolio room. This is a great area to get that visualization into more of our epic and themes. And it is asking me to make a different selection in the context bar. So occasionally you will see this where you need to make a very specific selection in the context bar for this view to work. And we can view this room for multiple PIs if we want. Just for the sake of time, I'll leave it at one, but you can add multiple in here to get that multi-PI view, which at the portfolio layer is often what we are wanting to look at. So we're going to see information again more about our themes. We're going to see that epic backlog here, our overall PI progress. And then you'll notice here we're going to see some progress, but this is going to be looking one layer down at our programs. But any of this progress, if you can see it as I'm hovering over here, is all based on story points. So again, anytime we're looking at these visualizations around progress, it goes back down to the teams where we need to make sure we have good practices about estimating, linking, and accepting our work so we can get visualizations like this to work for us. There are a couple of additional views to the portfolio room around resources as well as financials. Again, any progress is going to be based on that story point, accepting our story point. So we want to start there. Let's see where we're at. Okay. Real quick, I'll just show you the product room. Again, the product module isn't always necessary, just depends on how you are actually organized. When it comes to your programs and value streams, etc. But this is here to show you any of your work items that are linked into your product. And this may just take a second to load here. And it's just going to give us a good glimpse into data about our product. There we go. Things like personas, objectives, our effort and value, etc. So really pretty much all the layers of scale that you see over here on the left-hand panel are going to have a room that has visualizations or widgets really centered around that layer. The last thing I'll show is just the reports menu here. There are dozens and dozens of reports in Jira Align. Just to show you, I'll just scroll a few times here. I've scrolled probably 4 times on my mouse, and I'm just at the Fs. So there's lots of reports available. So I always like to give a couple pro tips when it comes to the reports. First, try and think about what metric you are actually needing from a business perspective, and then go into looking at the reports. I've seen time and time again that organizations think every report here needs to work for them. And to be honest, they aren't all created equally. They don't all fit with everyone's process. For example, some of them may be based on time tracking. And if you aren't doing time tracking, that report may not be valuable for you. So just keep that in mind. You can also toggle off reports and the administrative settings that aren't useful for your organization. So just keep that in mind as you're going into the reports. I also like to mention searching for reports. So this search bar up here at the top is a little bit of built-in AI, and it's actually looking for a specific question. And you can see the questions on the little report cards down here. But I'll be honest, I have personally not taken it upon myself to memorize those questions. What I prefer to do is to either use Control F on my keyboard just to search the browser page. And I could search for something like Rome. And it's going to take me down to that title or description with that in it. Or you can search the navigation panel over here as well. And I'm just going to open this up, and I want to mention again, don't forget about the help button when you're looking at reports. So this is going to show you that documentation for that specific report. It's going to show you specific prerequisites, how the values are calculated, and then how to interpret the report as well. So some of those reports really do some types of mathematical calculations. So it's great to look at that just to get an understanding. And I'll mention again, if you're needing custom reports, there is the add-on Enterprise Insights that can connect to your BI tool of choice that can really give you a lot of options for custom reporting. All right. Well, that wraps up our content here. I'm going to throw the Jira Align Bootcamp back on the board here. Do check out any of the links in the link tree in the chat for our upcoming Jira Align Bootcamp, our upcoming Jira Align and Wine event, etc. And we're going to get to the Q&A, but first I want to announce the winner of our Power Pack here. And that is going to be Melinda Nadler. So if you will send your shipping information to the email in the chat to Elizabeth Wheeler at xbm.com, she will get that shipped out to you. Oops, and I have totally gotten off track here. All right, so we will just turn it over to the Q&A. If you have any lingering questions, do drop them in the chat. We'll spend, or sorry, in the Q&A panel, and we'll just spend the next couple of minutes going through those. All right. Great question about the reports that we just showed. How customizable are they? When it comes to the data that the reports are showing, they are based off of your selection in that context bar. So you can customize what slice of data you are looking at in the reports. Again, if you're wanting to build out custom reports, I encourage you to check out that Enterprise Insights add-on and connecting that with a BI tool. All right. How good is Jira Align at catching errors? I'm going to get off my PowerPoint here and jump back into Jira Align. Jira Align is pretty decent at, or has a lot of functionality to catch errors. It's actually, in my opinion, quite good at it. Again, going back to the program board here, any issue that is, or any item here that is red or orange, if you open that up, it's going to show you planning errors right up here at the top. And so these may be that you have conflicting dates, you don't have the right work items linked to this, work may not be committed or planned into a sprint, etc. It's going to detail that out for you here. And it's going to put it in priority order according to Jira Align, but I've typically found that anything that is red is usually a pretty high priority that we need to be solving. Oh, great question. What would the best way for a person new to Jira and this type of work to learn about Jira Align? Would the one-day boot camp be possible, or is there a training you'd advise before that? So the one-day boot camp is a great chance to learn about Jira Align. We're really taking you through a tour so you can get a feel for the tool. We actually give you access to this very instance that I am showing here for 2 weeks after the class, as well as on the day of the class, for you to actually experience working with that tool. Working with Jira Align as a user is pretty separate from working with Jira software, but we do have a Jira software class as well. If you are wanting to learn more about configuring Jira software, really you could take either in either order. So we do have a Jira Align class coming up next week, as well as later in June. And then there will be a Jira boot camp, I believe in about 6 weeks, probably 6 to 8 weeks. The current class is actually happening, finishing up today. So it'll be another 6 weeks for that class. Is Jira Align somewhat similar to Confluence? I would say that they're pretty unique tools, if you will. So Confluence really is going to be centered more around creating content, such as documentation or maybe like meeting notes, etc. That's really what Confluence is going to be most powerful at. Whereas Jira Align is more of a high-level work tracker, and so Jira software is also a work tracker. Again, works really great at that team level. When we start getting into Jira Align, that is where we are going to work at that team of teams level on up. And it's got all the great visualizations we walked through today to help you with that planning, visualization, and execution of that work. So it's really where we're trying to create our work items, put them through some type of a workflow, track progress, roll up information, etc. I think they can absolutely be used simultaneously. So you can create documentation about your work in Confluence and add some links to things like descriptions and whatnot in Jira Align. So great question. All right, that puts us right at noon. So thank you all for joining us. Again, please feel free to check out any of our resources and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, guys.